Stories don't define you. How you tell them will.
Hi, I'm Sarah Elkins, your host and Chief Storymaker at Elkins Consulting. In my work with coaching clients, I guide people to improve their communication using storytelling as the foundation of our work together. What I've realized over years of coaching and podcasting is that the majority of people don't realize the impact of the stories they share on their internal messages and on the people they're sharing them with. What really lights me up is guiding executives in uncovering the stories in their lives that are meaningful. The stories that, when shared with the right audience in the right way, connect, inspire, and motivate. Here's what a former client had to say about our work together. As a leader of leaders, I struggle with how and when to use my stories to emphasize the points my audience is looking for. It's a delicate balance between sounding like I'm bragging and delivering a message that needs to be heard. Sarah's approach to storytelling clears that obstacle so that you can deliver a clear and concise message using your stories to emphasize your points. It's truly amazing when it all comes together. Greg McDonough, Blackburn Capital Advisors, and President of the Entrepreneurs Organization of Washington, D.C. Visit elkinsconsulting.com to learn more about working with me. Today's episode of Your Stories Don't Define You, How You Tell Them Will features my new friend, Nicole Santer. And we're talking from, she is calling in from outside of Sydney, Australia. And of course, I'm here in Montana. And it's just yet another richness that we get to develop thanks to our online relationships. Nicole and I were introduced by Mike Fritzius. Everybody calls him Fritz. And some of us refer to him as the Fritziest. And he is just this amazing connector of people. He just seems to sense where people have similar energy and where collaboration needs to occur. So I was grateful for the opportunity to meet Nicole. And I'm excited to talk to her about her events business that she launched at the beginning of a pandemic and to hear more about her. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Your brings me right to my host family because I lived in Brisbane, Australia for a semester and had an amazing host family that I'm still very close with. So hearing your voice just brings me that kind of warmth because of the sentimental aspect of it. So I'm excited.
Do I sound really typical Aussie? Do I? Do I have that Aussie accent?
No, not necessarily. Not.
Oh, okay.
Well, you do to a certain extent, but I have to say, when I lived there, and my host family is very well educated. The mom is a teacher. She was a teacher. She retired, and father was a doctor before he retired, and 2 out of 3 of the sons became doctors. And
wow.
And so and so they had, I guess, their accent between people who went to school for many years and people who didn't go to school after high school or whatever. And I think the further I got into backcountry and the outback, the less I understood people because their accents would get very, very strong. But I think you get that in lots of places around the world. Don't you think so?
Oh, definitely. I've actually traveled right through America, starting sort of in New York and kind of moving my way because I was actually coming back home from traveling myself. So I kind of had these amazing, through Delta Airlines, I had all these amazing unlimited flights in America. So I'd literally get on a plane and just kind of go wherever I wanted for about 2 months. And it was just like, where do I feel like going today? It was just fabulous.
Wow.
So I got to see quite a lot of America myself. And when you go down south, there's a very different accent to, kind of New York and LA and everything in between. The accents change as you go through different parts of America as well. So we have the same with Australia. I'm born and bred in sort of the eastern suburbs of Sydney, which is kind of Bondi. People will know that as a landmark. Sydney is a beautiful city with the most amazing harbour, and it's all kind of surrounded by water. So it's very, very pictorial, and we have like the Sydney Harbour Bridge and the Opera House, which are kind of landmarked and what we're kind of known for in Sydney, and it's very different to anywhere in the world. I can't even kind of compare it to anywhere in the world, Europe or anywhere. So it's a very, very pretty city. And I think there's lots of pretty cities in the world. So, we're just up there as a place to definitely come and see. And, we're recording this sort of still in COVID, but, in May 2021. And I think there's going to be some really good flights prices to come to Australia post this pandemic. But, I think it's, hopefully once we get past this COVID, we'll see a lot more travel happening again around the world.
I certainly hope so.
Yeah, it's very, very pretty.
Yes, I remember it as being very pretty. I was only there for a few days, but I do remember it standing out because of the harbor and the opera house, because I've landed from an airport into many, many cities across the world. And in some parts of most cities, it all looks the same. You can stand in the middle of San Francisco and you may as well be in the middle of New York City or Paris, or, so there are just aspects of city life that are very similar. But you're right that there are the iconic figures of Sydney that make it different in that way. Yeah, like Times Square, New York. You'll never find anywhere that looks like Times Square.
No, definitely not. And it's really interesting because, you watch shows like $1 Million Listing and things like that. And they talk about, they've got this beautiful home and they've got these kind of views. And I'm looking at the views and it's just views of houses or views of nothing really. And I'm going, oh my God, that's not a view. What we have in Sydney is a view, because, there's a lot of homes that look towards the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and that is the view. And quite interesting, when you see what other countries and things think that, this is a nice view over Central Park, and I'm thinking, really? Okay, well, that's not a view. This is a view.
Well, I live in Montana, so I'm spoiled too.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really quite funny when you see them and they go, oh, this is a really cool view. But anyway, look, I hope all of your listeners do put it on their bucket list to come to Australia and certainly Sydney and, experience it, because I think it's something that everyone needs to do in their lifetime for sure.
I totally agree. I only got as far west as Canberra, and I didn't go as far south as Melbourne as I wanted to. It is definitely worth going to see. And if you ever want to see the Great Barrier Reef, you're going to have to go soon, because it's in distress as much as the glaciers are disappearing from here. The Glacier National Park is losing its glaciers. So
it's true.
Lots of see soon because they haven't been detected. Yeah. So let's get on to a happier subject.
Yes.
Speaking of travel, because I think that this is a great segue when we talk about travel and all of the experiences we've had, you and I, in traveling. I would love for you to just share a brief description with our listeners about what you do, because it will now make sense to them about your travel.
Yes. So my family were in catering and events before I was born. And as a small child, I'd be kind of lumbered in the kitchen and, in my bassinet, and I never really thought twice about it. And then, many, many years later, I actually started my career, kind of in foreign exchange, completely different office environment. And, I always knew that I wanted to go into business for myself, but I just didn't know what that was going to be. And then after I'd had my first son, I thought, oh, this could be. And I was talking to somebody, this could be interesting. I don't know what to do. Maybe I was still working at that time. And I thought I really wanted to sort of start my own business, and I just didn't know what that was going to be. And then one day over a lunch or a dinner, I was having a conversation with a cousin of mine who was telling me about their big corporate event that they just did for their organisation. And I thought, oh, an event. You did an event for it? What kind of event was it? And I sort of got really excited about learning about this corporate event. And I thought, gee, that that sounds really like lots of fun, organizing corporate events. And, and I kind of thought, oh, that sounds like really good. So I very naively kind of woke up the next day and thought, you know what, I am going to start my events company. And I just launched it and had no clients, but I thought, you know what, they'll come, build it and they'll come, as you always sort of kind of think in a very young, naive way. And they did, because I kind of got out there and I got on the blower and I rang up organizations and said, hey, I organize events. I'd love to help you with your event. And then you get this kind of moment when someone goes, oh, just looking for you. And I was just looking, we've got an event to organise and we just need someone like you that can organise it. I go, brilliant. So this was my very first event, was for women in business, and it was for about 400, 500 people. And it was an awards night. So it wasn't just a normal kind of dinner or anything like that. It was a big awards night. And I thought to myself, oh, this is going to be so exciting. And then I kind of came home to my husband and I said to him, I've won an event to do. I've got a new client. And he says to me, oh, great, fantastic. And I go, the only problem is it's a big event for, 500 people and it's an awards night. And I have no idea what I'm doing. And there was no courses back then. There was no go to university and do an event management course or anything like that. And I thought to myself, how hard is it? So my husband, who's a management consultant, sat down with me and developed an events methodology. And the events methodology takes you through from the very initial stage when getting a brief from a client to, going to, visit venues and what sort of questions to kind of ask them, then takes you through to, right through to organising the event on the day. And I've actually just now put that into a course, an online course, to help other people so that they get the tools that they need quickly so that they can organise an event. So I developed this events methodology and I started using it, and it was so good because it just allowed me to kind of really have a clear picture of what I needed to do when I needed to do it. And I was able to really deliver that event beyond expectations. So the client was so excited with what we delivered because I've sort of, there's two types of event managers. There's the very creative, who's very good at the, putting the tablecloths on and putting the fabrics together and coming up with, what the flowers are going to kind of look like and coming up with the whole design of it. So you've got that kind of event manager. And then you've got the other type of event manager who is strategic and very methodical in their approach. And they usually kind of end up doing kind of more sort of conferences and, more corporate style of events, where they're creative, they're doing the product launches, they're doing the most amazing designs, and they're, pulling a great concept together. The others are more kind of the tick box, and I'm, doing a project plan and I'm tick boxing everything off. In order to be successful as an event manager, highly successful, you need both skills. So if you're more creative, then you need the strategicness to come in and try and be a little bit more strategic in your approach. And if you're more strategic, then you've got to kind of work out a way to be more creative, because the two come together is what kind of makes a great event. And when you're creating an event, you're always creating a story. So it's not just, you're taking people on a journey. And so when you develop and build an event, you have to sort of build it in building blocks in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that has been my experience as well. And I remember walking somebody through how I was planning my no longer virtual conference that first year in 2017. And I talked about how the first thing I did was look at locations. And the first thing I thought of as I'm selecting a location in terms of a city was, how are people going to get there? And then I started talking about the details of once they get there, how are they going to get to the hotel? What are they going to see when they get to the hotel? What's going to be in their room for them? And what are they going to see when they first come in the morning? And I was talking about, the catering, making sure that you have something for everyone. And he said, "Oh, that's just too much detail for me."
Often people do that. Most people go, okay, I need a venue. And that's the first thing they actually think of is, oh, I need a venue. Where should I go? Now, that is not the first question that you should be asking. You need to find out what is the objective of this event, and what do we want the event to do, and how do we want the attendees to experience this event. Because if you choose a venue, which I've had many clients choose a venue and then engage an events person going, oh, we've booked the venue, and the venue doesn't fit with what they actually want. So It's really important to sort of really understand what you want and how you want to develop and design this event for the best impact before you go and search out the venue, because you might say, look, you know what, I'd love to have a, networking event, and maybe I want this networking event to be by a poolside, but you've actually booked a venue that doesn't have any poolside and it doesn't have any outdoor area for networking. And you might say, look, that's a mandatory. I really need that outdoor area, or I need a room where we can actually have for a networking or a lounge area or a bar afterwards. So you have to kind of think about the whole concept before you go diving into the venue. The venue, you need to be able to tick off exactly what you need first from a venue, going, I need these things. These are mandatory before I go choose my venue. So if you've articulated exactly what you're looking for and how you designed how you want this event to be from beginning to end in your head, and sort of wrote down a good brief of what you need from a venue, and that's what we've got in our checklist, so that you can actually determine exactly what you need from a venue before you kind of go. You might need breakout rooms. You might need specific green rooms. You might need a cloakroom because the weather's bad. You might need, and you've chosen a venue that doesn't have that, and you might need to build it, or you might have limited money, and you might not want to have, bring in the tables and the chairs and start from things. You might go, look, with our limited money, I want to find a venue that actually has all of that already in-house, and I don't have to worry, or I've got an in-house caterer and I don't have to worry. So it's all about sort of really understanding your requirements and what you're trying to deliver before you go running off to find the venue, and I've booked a hotel, and I've booked a this and I've booked a that, and then you go, oh, that's not kind of the style that I'm looking for.
Right. I remember when I was working for a hotel, and I had a bride and her mother come in because they were looking either for the reception site or for rehearsal dinner. And I remember saying to her, what do you want your guests to think about when they leave? What do you want them to talk about? Because she hadn't really prioritized what she wanted out of her event. And I said, do you want them to talk about how great the food was? Do you want them to talk about the location, how beautifully decorated it was? Do you want them to talk, like, what are your priorities here when you leave? What do you want to remember about your special day? And I used to do that with every bride that would come in, and we would jot down their top priorities, and then they could budget around that. If it was, we want people to know how wonderfully paired the food and wine were, then that's where your priority is going to be in terms of budget. And I remember one woman, she was probably 22 getting married. And you have to set aside the whole, I couldn't possibly get married at 22, but maybe this will work for her. I mean, that's always, that little trying not to be judgmental. I remember hearing her say, I want them to talk about how beautiful I looked. And I said, okay, there's your priority. You have to make sure that day is spent where your money is spent on your gown, on your hair, on your makeup. And so if that's your priority, this is where the money needs to be spent. So I hear you. You really need to, for me, it was all about guests. How do you want your guests? Because that, you're not going to have any fun if your guests aren't having fun in terms of a wedding. But every event is like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's very important that the event flows. There's nothing worse than turning up to an event that maybe it's a wedding and all of a sudden the band's not playing, the food's not coming out, there's nothing happening, everyone's just standing around talking, and there's just this lull, and the energy completely gets zapped out of the room. Even though people do like to talk, but when there's nothing happening, they kind of get uncomfortable because they think, oh, I should be doing something. Why isn't there nothing happening? Why is there no food? I've got to talk to the people next to me. And, it's kind of like, oh, so you have to build an event as a sort of a story. You have to build an event like a story. You have to build the people. So you have to sort of start slow and keep building it up to a crescendo. So that the last thing is when the bride leaves. But you've got to keep building it throughout the event so that there's always something happening. There's an element of surprise. And people are going, oh, wow. If you want people to talk about your event, whether it be a corporate event or a private event or a wedding, then you have to build it so that there's things for people to talk about. So whether it's if food is important, for example, they go, oh, my God, you should have seen this dessert that came out at the event. It was phenomenal. They brought out this table. Then they threw all this food onto this table, and they made this amazing Great Barrier Reef, all made out of beautiful coconut chocolate and, coconut cream. And, it just looked phenomenal. I actually did that at an event. For a conference. And in fact, because I actually had 4 speakers in a panel, and then I had to take them away and then kind of get the next 4 speakers on. And the client said to me, you know what, it gets very heavy when you've got 4 speakers at a conference, and then, you go from there to the next one. It gets very kind of, people get quite drained by listening and more content. So right. If you sort of break it up with a bit of like spontaneity and something different, and, we brought out this table, we brought out chefs, we put Pavarotti music on. So it was like really emotive, and people kind of went, oh my God, what is this? I've never seen this before. And these 2 chefs came out, and I said to the chef, so I actually kind of designed it because the chefs kind of, were going to they were going to kind of bring out the table all done. And I said, oh, no, we need a show. We need to make this into a show. And I said, could we do that rather than you doing it in the kitchen where nobody sees? Let's bring it to the stage. And they went, oh, my God, really? Are you kidding me? I said, no, let's make you stars.
Awesome. Oh, my gosh.
And I said, and when you finish, I want your hands to go into the V shape in the air, like, wow, look what I've done. And like, really embrace it. And that's not something you really kind of do in Australia sort of thing. They kind of would do it and they go, da-da, here you go. But I said, no, I want the hands up at the end. So I want it to finish at the exact time as the music finishes. So you kind of have to time it. So you have to scramble to make this amazing. And they did. And everyone walked away talking about that.
Of course. Yeah.
The speaker. They're going to talk about a speaker that they heard and they go, oh, that was great. But if you want to be a standout speaker, wear the yellow suit and people will go, oh, this guy came out in this bright yellow suit. And he was so interesting because he's different. So if you want to do an event that really gets people talking, you have to deliver something that's different that people haven't seen. In Australia, and I'm sure it happened in America, we had this act called the Three Waiters, and they were like singing, opera and Pavarotti and all that sort of stuff. And it started here, and then it kind of, I think, went into America, and there was a whole like amazing story. So these waiters, these singers, would actually pretend that they were waiters, and they would be serving you. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the dinner, one would break out in song. And then the next one would start singing as well. And then the third one would sing. And then they would, develop this most amazing crescendo. And people would be going, oh, my God. And it was also interactive. So they would go up to people and say, hello, what is your name? And da-da-da-da. And they would sort of be interactive with the audience as well. So I think, when you're organising events, and the way I like to organise events is you have to create elements of surprise that people will talk about. People will not talk about the bride and how beautiful she looked for 2 minshe'll walk down the aisle, they go, oh, she looked so beautiful. And the women will do that, but the men won't even give it a moment's thought because they'll think, oh, yes, you look really lovely. And that's it. They just don't. They want to see, how beautiful they were and how the bridesmaids and how everyone looked really pretty and lovely and all the rest of it. But it's the entertainment, it's the food, and it's the experiences that we actually have at events that get us to talk about it.
And in the case of weddings, it's often what went wrong, and which is, I think, so much fun. So, for instance, this was 24 years ago almost. At our wedding, my grandmother was late because she had just recently broken her hip, and it was she had to have a special taxi come and pick her up. We're at the rehab center and drive her all the way across from Bethesda in Maryland, all the way down to Virginia and an old part of Virginia. And I said, I'm not going to start without her. I'm the bride and you can't start without me. And I'm not going to start until she gets here. And what ended up happening was our waiters asked my husband at the time, said, can we start serving the wine? Can we just pass around wine glasses while people are waiting, and beer? And my husband, of course, said, yes, absolutely. So all of a sudden, everything changed. They started bringing out these trays of wine and beer, and people started visiting again. And the string trio was playing, and they were just playing something else. And then I started, and people for years after were like, I love that you had us drinking wine as we were waiting for the wedding to start. And they didn't even know that wasn't part of the plan. So those things are kind of amazing, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's always great to find great concepts that people actually haven't actually seen before. And, finding the element of surprise is just really kind of what it's all about. And, at my wedding, which was, 27 years ago, because my family were in, catering and events, my mother really kind of knew how to kind of make a great event. And we had a maypole that came in. We had lots of dancing. We had these great big, huge 3-meter balloons that came in with lots of little balloons inside. So everyone was playing with those on the dance floor. And we came out with all these kind of maracas and all sorts of things that people can kind of dance with, and it had not seen before. So people were, hitting the big balloon, and eventually it popped, and all these, confetti came out in little balloons. And it's about finding, but people talked about that event for so long afterwards. It was,
and it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be,
it doesn't have to be expensive. It could be the way the dessert, it could be the way the entertainment, it could be, you could find different things. It could be like a snack before everyone kind of goes home. It could be like a milk and cookie snack or something like that, or a little coffee shot and a cookie that everyone goes, oh, look, before they go home, that's, we're passing around little cookies and coffee shots or something. So it's, or it could be, coming out of the ceremony, and instead of coming out of the ceremony, it could be like serving nice little cappuccinos to everybody, kind of thing. Would you like a cappuccino? And it's like, oh, it's about thinking about the experience that they actually want in an event, whether it be a corporate event or a private event. Think about that experience. And if you think about the experience and how can we make that experience amazing, people won't remember the flowers. People will not they'll think about them for 2 minutes, but it's the experience that they have, that they'll walk away with, and that's what they're going to remember.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
It's how you make them feel.
So let's talk.
And I actually,
I was just going to ask you to talk about your current business, because obviously we went at least a year before any kind of actual event could happen. So let's actually talk about that part, because I think a lot of our listeners will be curious about how you change things up. I mean, the pivots that you had to make as a result of that.
Yeah, so I started Extraordinary Events, which is my events management company 20-something years ago. And but one of the problems that I always found was I'm probably like kind of a good mix between creative and strategic, as I was talking about earlier. But one of the problems that, always for event managers is finding new event ideas and, and suppliers to work with. I was asked to organize an event in Hong Kong, and I had to get quotes from suppliers in Hong Kong so I could pitch for this, client's work. And the whole of China was on a holiday for a week. And I thought, this is just crazy in this day and age. Why can't we find suppliers anywhere in the world if we have to organize an event? As well as really great ideas. I would search the internet for great ideas all over the world. And this is kind of what led me to Event Buzz 360, because there's no platform at the moment in the world that showcases great ideas and great suppliers to work with. So I built it. So I built a company called Event Buzz 360. And if anyone wants to have a look at it, it's called eventbuzz360.com. And we're in the early stages at the moment, but we have got a huge vision. We want to, help suppliers find more leads, more customers. We want to help customers find great ideas and suppliers to work with. And we kind of want to kind of build it into this massive global platform to help the events industry and people looking to, organize their own event. We are bringing on jobs onto the platform as well. Because of COVID, lots of people have lost their jobs. And we know that when people are gearing up for events, they need additional resources. And so we think that the events and hospitality industry need a great platform to support them. And so we're building a jobs platform, which will be coming on hopefully later on this year. Excuse me. We've got some really great other initiatives in the pipeline as well.
Well, when we talked last week, when we first met and you were talking about this Event Buzz 360, I got all excited about it because I've been planning events for most of my life, and this no longer virtual event that I've been planning for 4 years, and this will be the 5th year coming up in 2022 because 2021 was canceled. I was thinking how nice it would be to have a resource like that platform. So if I decide I'm interested in having this, it's a relatively small event, I want to do it in Denver, where are the meeting locations? Because I would much rather start with that because I know what I have in mind for the experience for my guests, as we talked about before. And then the hotel can come later. But It would be so awesome to have a resource like that. That was really exciting to me. So what happened over COVID? I mean, were you starting to build it and then you had to stop, or what's going on with that?
So before COVID actually hit, I was already in the development stage of the platform. But because of COVID, I was able to focus a lot more on it and kind of push it a lot further and kind of, get a few suppliers onto the platform and kind of work it out. We're still in beta stage and we're just sort of, kind of working through it. So, it's still very early stages for us, but we have got a very big vision and, we've got a good database of suppliers that hopefully will come onto the platform, around 20,000 suppliers. At the moment, we don't have venues on there because we've just kind of got to we want to help the suppliers first, and then we'll go with venues a bit later on. And I kind of feel like sometimes, I think people rush into venues too quickly. And I think sometimes it's better to find some of the suppliers that you kind of want to work with before you choose the venue. Sometimes if you work with, an AV company or a catering company, you can kind of sometimes get better ideas of what you could use for a venue. And it's kind of good to sort of kind of build a great team around you for your event. And so we're actually going to be building, things like that for Event Buzz 360 where, teams can kind of collaborate and, get ideas. Because I think when you're building events, the more ideas that people bring to the table, the better your event's going to be. Mm-hmm. If somebody says, Sarah, I think it'd be really cool if you did this at your event. And you go, oh, I had never thought of that. I've not seen that before. And you go, oh, yeah, we've done this for another client, or we've seen something similar somewhere else. And, mm-hmm. Maybe there's this most amazing interactive kind of LED screen where you can come up and write on the screen, and you can, have this most amazing interactive experience. So maybe it'd be really cool to kind of bring something like that on, and you could allow people to play with that during the breaks instead of just standing there eating their food. They could kind of come up, and you could kind of get a sponsor that would like to kind of brand it for their events. So there's ways to sort of kind of play with the ideas and what you can do, and then people will talk about that afterwards. They'd be going, oh, we went to this event, it was so great, it was a workshop, but in the breaks they had this amazing interactive, and then people also video other people doing that at your event, and then that becomes a sociable thing that people share, which means that people are sharing content from your event. You have to look at also events now with what can people share. So, you'll see that sometimes people have photo booths at weddings and events because they want to make moments where people can actually share content through their social media. So always you've got to think about all of the things that are involved, all the elements of the component and what you want to achieve with your event. Are there, moments where people can share on social media? Is there something that people can do? Is there moments that people will talk about afterwards? What are those moments? How can we create them? So when we build a story, you can think of an event like even a dinner party at home. So say you're having a party at home, all your friends are invited. Now, if you say to your guests, just come over, I'm having a birthday party, and just kind of come. And if your guests just arrive at the front door and the front door is wide open and they kind of come in and they're feeling quite lost because they're not feeling that comfortable, they're an acquaintance of yours, but they're not a good friend of yours, so they're just coming in and they're walking in alone, they're feeling quite uncomfortable. There's nobody there to kind of greet them. There's nobody there to sort of that they know, and they don't really know there's no one offering them a drink, and then they go, oh, there's a bar over there. I'll kind of go over to the bar and get myself a drink, and I'm standing there with a drink and I'm not really knowing anyone, and I can't find my host, and, I can't find Sarah. She's busy talking to everyone. She's like a big social butterfly because it's her birthday, and I'm feeling quite uncomfortable and awkward, I don't know what to do. I don't even know what to do. And then, there's the drink that I want, it's all half run out. So what am I supposed to do? Go to the fridge and get some more drink, or go to the box underneath and get more drink out? I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. And there's this kind of uncomfortableness because they kind of feel awkward and feel uncomfortable. But what if they were to come to your birthday party and you welcome them at the front door and said, hi, Nicole, so glad you came. I'm so happy you're here. Thank you so much for coming. Let me, take your jacket off you. Let me welcome you in. Let me get you a drink. And do you know, Fritz over here, who's a good friend of mine, and I'd like to introduce you to Nicole, and you've made me feel instantly welcome. You've taken my jacket. You've given me a drink. You've introduced me to somebody. It becomes a whole different experience. So when you build events, you have to think about the attendees or your guests at the time, and what kind of impression are we giving them? What kind of event are we giving them? Even if it's a birthday in your own home, you have to guide them. You have to take guests on a journey, and it means looking after them. You have to think of your guests like herds of sheep or cows that need direction. If you don't give them direction of where they're supposed to be, then they feel awkward. They feel uncomfortable, and they don't want to stay because they're not feeling comfortable. People want to feel comfortable at events, and it's our job as the organizer to make them feel comfortable. So
absolutely,
if we can do that, then I think we're doing a great job. And I kind of want to help people kind of come up with that,
Do you remember a time when you went to an event that all you could think about was all the things that they could have done better? Because I do that still.
all the time. And I think that's every event. I think there's even your own events, you'll always critique it because you're thinking that way. It's like, being a kind of a perfectionist. I've got a background in catering and events, catering and cake decorating. I kind of went down that path for a bit as well. And, I can look at a cake and go, oh, that is phenomenal. or I can look at a cake and go, it's okay. It's just a bit ordinary, They could have done better here. Let me tell you, my cakes were okay. They weren't perfect, but, I don't know. I think I'm better at events than doing cakes, but look, everyone. Look, it's hard to kind of you definitely do critique other people's events, but you have to remember most of the attendees don't see what you see, and as a trained event organizer and trained professional, you see them and you go, oh, they could have done this better, they could have done that better. There was a bottleneck here and they shouldn't have done that, and they didn't allow for that, and they didn't think about that, and or they got on the bus and there was some rubbish under the bus, seats or something like that. Nobody checked it, and all the toilets were not perfect and they needed to check that. It's about the whole experience, and you kind of have to kind of check all these things off. I mean, I went to a wedding and they forgot to have the, where you're seated. So all of a sudden it was like, a bit of a mishap there, that the catering company was supposed to do it, or the event company was supposed to do it, and they forgot the seating plan. And so when guests were coming up, they kind of had to kind of work out where they were seated, and it was kind of a bit of a debacle. But
no kidding.
They were doing their best to kind of help, and I think I even got in to try and help them. And it happens. It just happens. You're packing so much into your car, and or your trucks and things like that, and it was a destination event. So it was all even further, like they couldn't, it could easily be missed.
Right. They couldn't just run home, right?
They can't kind of run home and pull it up and things like that. But if you're really organized, you can troubleshoot that kind of thing, I've had, situations where, I've had to get under the table and kind of, behind the stage and, fix the AV, because my AV crew were stuck on the harbour bridge, on the other side of the harbour bridge. We had a huge accident on the harbour bridge. Never happens like this. It was such a bad accident that this truck, they had to get a helicopter to take the truck off the harbour bridge, which never happens.
Wow.
But it kind of happened at my event. So I kind of had to kind of, run this event, and I had a very nervous client who hadn't worked with me before, and was kind of on, running like, is this okay? What's happening with this, Nicole? What's happening
Stressed,
with this? You have
right.
that's completely stressed.
Trying to micromanage just because they're stressed.
Totally. Yeah, and I sort of, had to sort of, reassure them that I'm doing everything, my team is doing everything to make this happen, and just give me some time to kind of, get this my ducks all lined up. Because things kind of do go wrong in events, and it's sort of, you need that. If you're really super organized, you can actually troubleshoot it. Now, the audience had no idea that this event had any problems, because I actually kind of got in and through my phone I was speaking with the AV crew, and what do I need to do. I don't know if you've ever seen an AV desk. There are like buttons everywhere. And it's kind of like you're in the cockpit of a plane. It's kind of really overwhelming, and you kind of just kind of want to kind of make this event great for them. So that's kind of what we've done, and I'm hoping that I can kind of help the industry kind of do more events, and I think events are fun, and I think events are growing around the world. We organise 30,000 business and private events a day. So there's a lot of events going on out there, and a lot of very capable people, the most amazing event suppliers around the world I've come across, and I'm very excited to kind of share some of their, what they're doing on our social media, on our platform. So, I think the best thing I can say is your event is only as good as the ideas that you have and the impressions that you make on your audience. And if you can make a really good impression on your audience by, finding great suppliers, finding innovative ideas, then I think you can take your events to a whole new level, and you'll get people talking about it. And that's,
Definitely.
using
I think it's
technology and lots of different things, components.
right. And I think one of the things that I notice is that there's a really simple way, especially with smaller events, but any event, it's a really simple way to ensure that people are going to remember it well, that they'll have a positive memory of it. And that's to make them feel hosted. And that doesn't have to be complicated, and you don't have to be super hyper creative about it. And I remember going to a wedding just a couple of years ago where they had little gift bags at the hotel front desk for people who were checking in. And I always did that when we would have family events, weddings, and bar mitzvahs. Always have a little gift. And in this case, it was they had a couple bottles of water. They had some lip stuff because we were in a very dry environment. They had a couple of those individual packages of either ibuprofen or Tylenol or something like that, with the anticipation that we were going to have a few drinks that night. And it was just these little things, and it wasn't expensive, but the detail that was involved, that it had our name on it on a sticker, and there was something in it specifically for us because they knew us. And granted, they were only doing 25 of these bags, but still, just those little details. Again, it didn't have to be expensive, but I remember it clearly. It's memorable to me because I'm still talking about it a couple of years later, because of that little personal touch that they were hosting us, that they were glad we were there and that we were an important part of their celebration. And you can do that on a huge level in an event of 2,000 people and 4,000 people. You just have to actually pay attention to that one small detail that's going to make them feel like they're being hosted and cared for.
Yeah, look, I also, when I've done weddings and things like that, it's also about putting really nice things in the bathrooms as well. And, kind of even deodorant and stuff like that people can, if they've been dancing a lot or they're feeling a bit like, especially the men, they kind of get quite hot, because they're usually wearing a shirt or a jacket.
Suit, right?
Suit, yeah, so it kind of gets quite hot, where women kind of wear like, a sort of like a strap dress,
sleeveless,
like
right?
That, So, I always kind of put like, kind of perfumes and deodorants and flowers in the women's toilets, and some hand cream to make them feel kind of special, and so that they kind of come in there and feel like, oh, this is really cool. And, you can kind of also leave like kind of little stickers on the mirrors that sort of say, hey, you're looking fabulous, or don't forget to hashtag, on your social media, take a picture here, and kind of, you can kind of leave messages in the bathroom for people, like, with some stickers and, floor stickers. You can use floor stickers in a really innovative way as well, and, kind of walk this way, and this is a way, through, so people know where to go, or you're almost there, or if you're walking up, a lot of flights of stairs, and you're almost at excitement, you're almost there, and there's ways to create anticipation and excitement, then they don't have to be costly, but it makes people feel like, oh, you've gone to the extra trouble. It makes people feel that you care. So I always kind of do things like that, and that's always really kind of really appreciated, and I think it keeps the standard of your event at the 5-star rate, level, rather than a 3 or a 4. It doesn't matter what your budget is. It's how you make people feel. It doesn't matter what the food is. It's how you make people feel. It doesn't matter what's going on. It's as long as, how you make people feel is the most important thing.
Absolutely. So to bring this full circle and kind of wrap it up, I love the story of the chefs building a Great Barrier Reef in front of an audience. That is just, I'm still visualizing that because I've actually been. Yes, I would love that, because I've actually been to the Great Barrier Reef, so even more so. But and I would love to include that in the blog post associated with this podcast. But I'd love to hear one more story about that kind of thing that stands out about an event that you went to or that you created and planned.
I did this charity event for abused women and children. And I've been doing that for many, many years. And we had to create this amazing event that really sort of tapped into people so that people would kind of, open their wallets and donate to this charity. And we called it the Unmasked Children. So because these delinquent children just kind of didn't really have a voice for themselves, they couldn't speak up for themselves, they were, in trouble with the law, and, they just had to kind of, and they had trouble with their family. They were either abused or, and this charity helps these organizations. And, we decided to actually create this most amazing monologue that kind of took people behind the scenes so that people could actually understand what kind of goes on. And so if you know the sort of the mask from Phantom of the Opera, we had these masks sort of, but they were more sort of, full masks rather, with the white, the eyes come through them. So we had these masks on the tables, and we called it the Unmask the Children. And, we were coming up to the pitch night for, to get everyone to sort of donate money. And what we did was we had this kid standing in the sort of the doorway, kind of coming through, and there was kind of smoke, and he was wearing a mask. And he was actually a soldier as well. And he kind of was coming through, and everyone's going, "Oh my God, what's going on here? What's going on here? Who is this person?" And, he wasn't a young child. He was sort of in his 20s. And he kind of came through and he made his way up to the stage, and everyone's going, "Oh my God." And then he starts to speak, and then he takes off the mask and he says, "I was one of these masked children." And he tells a story about how he, his family did this, and how he sort of kind of grew and went and did that. And this was done 20 something years ago, quite a long time ago, before this was kind of happened. And now we go to charity events, and we usually hear a story of somebody who's kind of gone through the kind of the pain, and before we kind of donate. But this was kind of a bit more theatrical, and it's an event that kind of really stands out in my mind because it was very emotive, and it was very real, and it was very dramatic. This kid had been through such a journey, and their dollars would kind of help other kids like this. And it sort of really, and we raised the most money we had ever raised ever, and it was quite phenomenal. And I think a picture paints 1,000 stories. And if you think about Pixar, they're always storytelling, and they're always talking about how do we articulate a story. And when we put on events, we are storytelling, and we need to think about that. Even if it's a corporate event or a birthday, we are storytelling. Often with birthdays, we like to share, where they've grown from and how they've grown up and all the fun things that they've done in their life. And they went for this holiday and that, and we show all these wonderful pictures because people want to share stories. People don't just want to share, what they did. They want to know how it made them feel.
Mm-hmm.
So
sounds like an amazing event, and kind of ahead of its time, because it wasn't as common back then to have somebody who had experienced that level of neglect or abuse to share their story, certainly not in person. And
No.
It was often far more anonymous, and that's not nearly as powerful as having that person who had experienced it right in front of them. So I'm not surprised that you raised a lot of money at that event, and that's fantastic. I love that story. And I think, again, just to jump right in there, when you can tell a story, it's not the event itself that it's telling a story, but it's what stories are you creating for the guests? What stories are they going to be telling about your event? And every aspect of that is foundational. Every aspect of your event is foundational for the next story. So
absolutely. That's why I love events, because it's just so interesting. It's just, you get this clean piece of paper and you go, okay, now what do I want to make? What do I want to create?
Exactly.
And, sometimes you're spending more money on the food and sometimes you're spending more money on the entertainment, but you kind of, or it might be, technology or something like that. But it's always, you start with a nice clean piece of paper and you always go, now what can I make this into? And,
yes.
There are some event managers out there that love to create things that people haven't seen before. And then there's a lot that kind of go, you know what, I'll copy what this is because people haven't seen it. There's a lot of people that like to copy what other people have done, and there's nothing wrong with that either. It's about, working out what it is that you want to create for your event,
Absolutely.
And I like to try and bring that amazing ideas. So that's why Event Buzz 360 has kind of been formed, so that we can find those amazing ideas and suppliers and share it with other event organizers so that they've got the ideas to take back to their clients and go, hey, let's do something different than we've done before. Let's think outside the box. I've seen this and this and this. And then kind of go, oh, that sounds really interesting. Yes, haven't seen that before.
Mm-hmm. And I think now, because there has been a year plus where people really haven't been able to do events in the same way, I think people are going to be especially hungry for the creativity that we can find in events. I don't think we'll ever go back to a boring event because people don't have to go anymore. So I think your events platform is right on time. I don't think it was the wrong time when you started this project. Really, I think this is exactly the right time to be exploring the potential for events all over again. And thank you so much for joining me today and talking about this. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's been absolutely fun. I probably talked too much, but I've really enjoyed it.
Well, clearly you're passionate about what you do, and nobody can fault you in that way. So just so our listeners know, you can connect with Nicole Santer are you on LinkedIn?
Nicole? Yeah, definitely. Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. She's on LinkedIn. And tell me the name of the website again.
eventbuzz360.com.
eventbuzz360.com. And if you're listening on the road and you can't stop to write things down, just know that if you go to elkinsconsulting.com and click on the podcast page, I will have a blog post associated with this episode with these links included in it, and hopefully a picture.
Oh, awesome.
A picture of the Great Barrier Reef made from food by two chefs.
Definitely. I'll definitely put that up for you. And like that, the chefs sort of thought, like, when I was telling them, they're going, oh, okay. And now they've done it so many times. I've created this new act for them and they've kind of gone, oh, okay. So this is really interesting.
We can play with this. Well, we do tableside service in fancy restaurants. You do a tableside Caesar salad or a tableside tartare or a tableside flambe. So this is just the next level of doing tableside, right? Because it's all performance.
It is all performance. And it is like, you kind of want to put on this kind of amazing show that people kind of go, wow, that was something different. That's something that I've not seen kind of before. And, that's where it's kind of goes, takes things to a whole new level. I mean, it worked for me for two reasons, obviously, because I didn't have to get a whole lot of, 4 more microphones. Right. And the speakers had time to kind of change over the mics and things. And it also gave the attendees something to think, like, kind of de-stress on the content coming through. You kind of just need to let your mind settle in your and kind of go back to creativity, because creativity spawns interest and innovation.
Absolutely.
So you kind of have those kind of breaks. And I think the way forward for business events is going to be very much more interactive anyway. I think that we're a bit over hearing a speaker just speak at us for 40 minutes. We kind of want to have a voice as well. We want to be able to ask questions. We want to be able to interact,
contribute. Right, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I'm with you. That's what I've been doing with the No Longer Virtual Conference. So I totally agree. And we need to leverage the experience in the room. There are lots of people with things to add. So, yes.
Oh, definitely.
Nicole,
Sounds
thank you
amazing.
again.
Thank you.
Yes, this has been great. And I will, I'm excited to share this with our listeners. Thank you. Are you ready to start your story portfolio so you have the right story ready to share when the opportunity presents itself? When you're ready to get started, my book, Your Stories Don't Define You, How You Tell Them Will, is available in all the regular places, and the audiobook version is available on Google Play and on my website, elkinsconsulting.com. As a special bonus for listeners, the audiobook includes 2 songs recorded by my band, Spare Change, in my living room in Montana. Also on my website is a free podcast interview checklist. It's available to download to make sure you make the most out of your next podcast interview. If you enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to rate the podcast and leave a review. And let me know that you've done it so I can thank you properly.
Thank you.